just a little bit late.
As Mark said, there's also some coming down in this area. Up north, it's called the Utica-Collingwood Formation, which is a tight carbonate and shale. Down here, the companies are primarily looking at the A1 carbonate, and I think there's going to be more discussion on that. But for our purposes, those are typically using less fluids. Right now, they're using a lot of acid on those. That seems to be working better than a water for them. And sort of the interest is we've had one drilled up in one test in Oceana, one in Ionia, and now companies have permitted one nearby in Muskegon County in Urbana. We've also had a few high volume hydraulic fractures in Hillsdale County in what's called the Van Wert zone. One thing that I want to touch on that's a difference that you'll notice between vertical fracturing or vertical drilling and horizontal drilling, that large arc of red wells, the 12,000 wells in the interim that I showed you on that previous map, those were developed on an 80-acre spacing. So in an 80-acre parcel, you're going to have a well. So to give you an idea of surface waste, and we're concerned about surface waste as well, a typical build-out of a 36 square mile township in northern Michigan in that interim shale would have had approximately 288 well pads on that. Thus the big red arch. Now this is a typo. I was putting this out to Aaron real quick yesterday, so it says per acre. Don't hold me to that. Don't call and tell me I'm crazy. That's meant to say township, not acres. So for a typical, big difference. Yeah, 288 acres in a township. And we saw that development with the 11 to 12,000 wells up there. Now, conversely, when you're talking about long horizontals, if companies are drilling 1.5 to 2 mile horizontals, you take that same 36 acre or 36 square mile township and lay something on that, you'll see multiple wells launched off from single pads. What a build-out example of that would look a lot more like 20, I don't know what I wrote here. I'm not going to do math tonight, but 20 pads per township. So they're still running pipelines and connections, and there's roads going, but the surface waste potential and surface impact is less significant with the horizontals. Just wanted to touch real briefly. Our office, we have environmental regulations, but I think they're slightly different than a lot of other statutes because they deal with extracted resources. And our statutes, while all DEQ programs partner in environmental or in economic development, provide good customer service, and are focused on environmental stewardship, ours kind of have a different twist because they recognize that when you have resources in the ground like copper, nickel, oil and gas that are a benefit to society, that they come out of the ground, that it's wasteful not to use them if they can be developed economically without wrecking the environment. So our programs, obviously the economic side of it is if companies are here looking to mine or to take out oil and gas, then they're economic. So our program focuses on the environmental side of that. Part 615, supervisor of wells. This is the statute that regulates oil and gas from its cradle to grave. My group in Lansing, we primarily focused on the permitting, bonding, and reporting side of things, as well as the petroleum technology. We get heavily involved with the initial location and reviewing companies' planning of their cementing and casing programs. That redundancy in that plan is key to us. Hopefully, if I don't run out of time, I got 4.5 minutes left. I'll touch on that a little bit more. Once it's permitted, we turn it over to our area geologists who are responsible for being on site both during the drilling, construction, as well as the well completion phase, which would include hydraulic fracturing. We target to get out to those sites about 3 times a week and to be in communication continually with these companies. When our geologists are out on sites, they're reviewing the records to make sure cementing wait times match up, drilling speeds, looking around for spills and losses. We've also got them tethered with cell phones 24/7. In the oil and gas industry, they're responsible for reporting all spills and losses, even de minimis small spills. Odor complaints, like I said, we have our geologists tethered to respond to those instances day and night. We're also oversee waste, and with our air quality division, we work on the emissions. Typically on a single oil well site, emissions do not exceed any thresholds that require air quality permitting, renewable operating permits, but where you do get sites gathering together in lines and going to a central production facility, it's common that they are regulated by air quality and have a renewable operating permit. So we do work hand in hand with them. The EPA just passed new regulations for green completions on the hydraulic fracturing completions in industry, recognizing that the oil and gas industry, they're the #1 emitter of methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. I suppose the good news is the industry, through the shale gas development, the whole time they're greatly expanding their production, their greenhouse footprint has been going down, the amount of methane emissions, and I think they've got further that they can go with that. They can destroy methane during tests by using flares. They can work on recovery, and in the case of the company up north that's operating, they want to test and flow into wells, so they want that gas to go into sales, and they don't want to see the waste. Finally, we're involved in plugging and restoration of the site. That's really important and near and dear to my heart. When the company leaves, we don't want to see them leave a mess. 90 years of history, I can't say that we've always gotten it right. In the 30s, 20s, wells were not plugged to today's standards with cement. I mean, sometimes they had pine plugs down them. Sometimes during the Depression, they took the casing, the upper casings off and put a cannonball down there. And so we have an orphan well program that we've spent a fair amount of time going in and fixing some of the legacy issues, and we do have the ability to pull money from the severance taxes that the oil and gas industry pays to run our orphan well program. But I guess for me, who I still have some longevity hopefully in this agency, I want to see us not have to deal with legacy issues, but while we have active companies, that it's done right. I do want to mention this, I'm running out of time. Monumental to regulating the oil and gas industry on fracking. As it picked up in 2010 in Michigan, in 2011 we passed the Supervisor of Wells instruction that clarified the requirements that we wanted to put on companies, additional requirements for water withdrawal assessment, water level monitoring, reporting of fracturing pressures and annulus pressures, as well as volumes, and increased public disclosure, chemical disclosure in the form of material data safety sheets. This is what we focus on. I'm going to get the gong and the crook here. So hopefully we can circle back around a little bit during questions and answers and hit some of these, because I know they do want me to talk a little bit more about what we do to protect aquifers, because I know that subject's near and dear to the folks' heart here in Ottawa County. So we'll do that. I just want to leave you with the fact that there's a couple large studies going on at U of M and nationally with the EPA. I put these pictures up here because we've got 60 FTEs, full-time equivalent positions in Michigan regulating the oil and gas industry. I heard from the North Dakota Environmental Quality Director last week in DC that they've got 8 FTEs for the Bakken. So I feel that we're well staffed as management and OOGM. We invest heavily in our people to get them trained, make sure they've got the right equipment. We invest in our databases, trying to improve transparency, and everything's on the table. This sort of format, even though it's public outreach and we do a lot of these to folks, it's also a listening session for us, so we can continually hear what the public's concerned about. We talk with environmental groups. industry. The future, hopefully, we're going to be incurring more green chemistry, water reuse. That doesn't come without its own problems. Right now we have a very good program because we require flowback to go to steel-lined pits. When you ask for recycling of water, you really can't do that when you're talking about the scales that we have without introducing above-ground or in-ground pits for flowbacks. So we proceed with caution. We don't leave, we don't shut the door, and certainly we want to encourage companies in that way, but you have to look at all angles of these issues. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Adam. If you don't mind, let's give Adam a round of applause. We had 170 individuals registered for this event tonight. We knew we were going to have more. We're up over 200. I don't know what the exact count is yet, but I do know that some of you did not get handouts. If you need them, they are in the back. You can get them afterwards. You can go out right now. Anne's got them in the back. Additionally, speakers and have brought some handouts that are back there as well if you didn't get them between the water and the coffee. And without further ado, we'll try to stay on schedule here. Our next speaker is Alan Hinks. He is a geologist with 35 years of experience. Alan's worked at West Shore Consulting in Muskegon for 17 years. He specializes in geophysics and computer modeling applications and has experience in mineral, oil, gas, and environmental work. And he's going to be talking about Ottawa County geology and whether it's conducive to hydraulic fracturing. Alan, thank you. Oh, I need to put your presentation up. That will help, won't it? And here's the clicker if you want to use that.
Hi. Hello. My name's Alan Hinks. I'm a geologist, as said. I live in Grand Haven Township, so I'm local, so for what that's worth. 10 minutes isn't much time to cover 509 years, so keep going. What I'm going to talk about tonight is the geology of Michigan, how oil and gas are formed, the difference between conventional and unconventional oil and gas plays, and whether or not Ottawa County is prospective for unconventional plays. Well, this is what Michigan is thought to have looked like 385 million years ago during the Devonian period. The Devonian was part of the Paleozoic era, which went from about 250 to 520 million years ago. There's Michigan there. You can see much of the U.S. shown here. In this slide, the blue represents water, the brown is land, and the lighter blue shades are shallower seas. Well, during most of the Paleozoic, we were underwater. We were shallow inland sea. During this time, the basin, Michigan is famous for being a circular basin. This area subsided. And as it subsided slowly, it was filled with sediment pretty much continuously during that period of time. And a thick accumulation of sediment built up. Those sediments were calcium carbonate, stuff your bones are made out of, and sand and shale that was washed in from the land around it. Well, this is a present-day picture. It's a cross-section. And what it's showing is a cross-section is a slice through land. So it's showing what it would look like if you could just cut Michigan in half, basically. And what you see is that in the center of the basin, you have Paleozoic Cambrian through Mississippian rocks, even up into the Pennsylvanian represented. The deepest part of the basin is to our northeast. We're on the side, as I'll show you in a minute. One thing you'll notice here is that the top, the Devonian rocks, for instance, and I just showed you the Devonian time period, are eroded off. So the basin is actually quite a bit deeper historically. Interestingly, on top, you can see it's eroded off, and if you read it, it's covered with glacial sediments. And these things are very recent geologically, tens of thousands of years old. So you have a big gap in time between these Paleozoic rocks, which are millions of years old, and these glacial deposits here. Well, this is a present picture. It's a map that shows what Michigan would look like if you could remove all the glacial sediments. So it's kind of what Michigan looked like before glaciers came too. What this map shows, the different colors are different ages of rocks. And what you have here is the youngest rocks in the center, the deepest part where they were preserved. And as you go out in these rings, you get older and older. Ottawa County's in this area, as you know. So we're on the southwest side of the basin. Well, now we're stepping back into the past again. These Paleozoic seas, the shallow seas, were full of life. A lot of it was microscopic. Well, as those things died, they sank to the bottom of this basin. And because the basin was continuously subsiding, with sediment coming in, they could get buried. Well, things that fell into calmer waters had a lot better chance of being preserved. When you fall into the sediment in an area that's got strong currents or wave action, it gets stirred up and oxygen comes in and destroys that organics. So they fell out in calm waters. That's where they were preserved. An analogy would be a wet, very calm area where you get a lot of clay falling out. In these calm areas, you get clays like that fall out, impermeable carbonates and clays, and that's what these things got caught up in and buried. Those sediments are what we call low permeability. It's hard to pass anything through them. Well, this again is a cross-section. That's kind of a schematic. What I want to talk about is the fact is as these things got buried in the basin, they got exposed to heat and pressure, and they turned into rocks, sediments. Well, the organics that got trapped in those rocks were heated and put under pressure too, and they turned into oil and gas. So geologists would say they got cooked. Well, the rocks that contain those low permeability rocks that contain the organic matter that got cooked are called source rocks by petroleum geologists. That's where the oil and gas comes from. And like I said, they're low permeability, so a lot of the gas and oil is stuck there. But you expose it to such high pressure that through time, some of it was pushed out. And most of the subsurface is filled with ancient seawater. What happened when it got squeezed out is if it got into a permeable layer like a dolomite or a sandstone permeability, it got into that seawater and it floated uphill, just like oil or gas would do in a puddle in a parking lot. Well, two things happened when it went uphill. It would either find its way out to the surface, and historically Michigan had several oil seeps where you could find oil at the surface. The second possibility is it would get trapped. It would get trapped by an impermeable layer. And then it would become what we call a conventional trap. And that's what oil and gas people have looked for the last 100+ years, these conventional traps. These things are impermeable rock, so you don't need to create additional permeability to get them out. This schematic shows several examples of conventional traps, anticlines, where things fall uphill and just get stuck. Well, because it was so impermeable, those source rocks, not all the oil and gas could get out. And that was just a fact of life. There was no way to get it until a few decades back, because it was just too impermeable. Well, these source rocks then are what we call, what are unconventional is now. By creating permeability, by fracturing these layers, we can capture some of that oil and gas that is trapped in those layers. Well, this is a stratigraphic column of Michigan. A stratigraphic column shows the rocks underneath us in a general sense. Most of this, in Michigan, we have the Paleozoic represented. We have glacial drift way up on top, and the very old Precambrian crystalline rocks down here, and in between Precambrian sediments that fill in that subsiding Michigan basin through time. And what I've done here is I've circled some of the layers that are getting attention in Michigan as unconventional reservoirs. The antrim, which Adam touched on a bit, the A1 carbonate, which is a new play idea, and the Utica. And for those of you who are paying attention, this should actually be up here. Stratigraphic columns show rocks as youngest at the top and oldest at the bottom, and any place where they're not flipped over, which happens in mountainous areas sometimes, not Michigan, that equates to being deeper too. So the antrim shallow and the A1 is shallower than the Utica. Well, looking at these individually, the antrim shale, it goes back decades. Michigan was one of the earliest in the country and the world really to have an unconventional reservoir. As Adam discussed, most of the production is north of us. We do have similar depths, and that's an important consideration in the antrim in Ottawa County, but a few wells in Allegan County have not been promising for it. I don't know a lot about it, but there hasn't been much attention on the antrim. The A1 carbonate, it's a recent play. That's what the permit in LuAnne is for. It's been permitted. I see that. There is a well in Ionia County that has been drilled. From what I hear, it looks promising. It gets into liquids and volatiles, which are worth more money than the natural gas. There's some discussion that Ottawa County might be in that oil liquids window. If that proves to be the case, there will be attention brought to the Ottawa County A1. The Utica, or the Pinewood member of it, is thought to be most promising up north. Ottawa County isn't that promising. This is evolving. Every year it seems like something new comes along. Well, I hope that's shed some light on this. Rick Sandry has several samples of the beautiful rock types that you're welcome to look at. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Alan. We have 6 speakers tonight. 4 of them are pretty factual, straightforward, sharing information about geology, about regulations, about legal requirements, that kind of thing. We also have 2 speakers that may provide different viewpoints tonight. One is Richard with the Richard's not with Michigan Oil and Gas Association, but you are representing them. He is with Trendwell Energy Corporation. And we also have LuAnne Kozma, correct? And she is with the Committee to Ban Fracking in Michigan. And we flipped a coin in our office, and Richard got to go first. But I think you're going to hear 2 completely different viewpoints on this, and it should be very interesting. And Richard, without further ado, I'm going to let you start because we want to get through that 15 minutes.
Okay.
Oh, I am sorry.
Time's up.
Yeah, you can just go down here. Okay, Aaron, start the time now, not before.
Let's see if this works. Okay. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. I'm a petroleum engineer. I've got 37 years of experience. I went to school at Michigan Technological University and got an engineering degree there. I currently work for Trendwell Energy Corporation. We're located in Rockford, Michigan. Trendwell has been in business for about 35 years. We're a small family-run company that has been very successful in exploring for oil and gas in Michigan. I started my career with Texaco, worked with them, and then worked for other major oil and gas companies before coming to work for Trendwell. As Adam said earlier, there's been over 50,000 wells drilled in Michigan, and in Ottawa County, there's been about 1,088 wells drilled since 1939 here. And this county has produced about 2.2 million barrels of oil since that time, and about 6 BCF of gas. And BCF stands for billion cubic feet of gas. Okay, I'm going to speak a little bit about natural gas and oil, and then I was asked to talk about job and economic impacts for Michigan, and then talk a little bit more in depth about hydraulic fracturing. Natural gas, when we talk about natural gas, is one of the main components that has been looked for by these horizontal wells and hydraulic fracturing that has been talked about here. The United States has been fortunate with the discoveries that have been made in Pennsylvania and Texas and Ohio in the various unconventional shales that Alan spoke about, with a lot of gas, and there's also natural gas liquids in there. The Bakken Shale in North Dakota primarily contains oil. We in the United States are able to produce about 98% of all the gas that we use. We're very fortunate. In Michigan oil and gas producers produce about 23% of all the gas that we use in this state. We're the 13th largest producer of natural gas, and also one of the largest, 14th, I believe, largest producer of oil in the country. Natural gas is a clean burning fuel. It's much cleaner than burning oil, burning coal, burning fuel oil, and such. We've got vast supplies of natural gas because of the drilling that's being done and production being done in Pennsylvania and other states in these unconventional shales. The price of natural gas has dropped drastically in the last few years, from a high of about $12 per million cubic feet of gas in, say, 4 years ago to about $3.50. $3.60 per MCF. So the gas that's being sold to you by your utilities has dropped by 3 to 4-fold. And there appears to be so much gas that we've been able to find or identify for future drilling that we can see low gas prices for U.S. consumers for quite some time. How is natural gas used in Michigan? Most of it, 30% of it's used for electric power generation by your utilities. 21% of it's for residential use, and then pretty much the rest is for commercial and industrial use. And most of us, most citizens in Michigan, about 80% of us use some form of natural gas for heating your homes, and water heaters and natural gas stoves and the like. Jobs in Michigan. Michigan oil and gas industry directly employs approximately 10,000 people for their jobs in very strongly related companies that supply goods and services that we use quite a bit. There's another 23,000 jobs, and in all, about 163,000 jobs in Michigan are provided or supported by our industry. So, you know, most people, most friends and people that I know very rarely hear about the oil and gas industry in Michigan, but we're a pretty thriving industry here. We help provide a strong economy for Michigan, and our experience here has shown that we've been able to do it safely and environmentally responsibly. That comes along with working or having to work with companies like the Michigan Department of DEQ that Adam here represents here. The economic impact shows total labor income of coming from the oil and gas industry of $2.6 billion and value added economic output of about $5.7 billion. So it's not small. One thing I would like to point out, maybe township officials and county officials take note of this, those 10,000 to 12,000 wells that were drilled in the Antrim Shale that were shown in the red belt line in northern Michigan that Adam showed, those are Antrim wells. Our company operates about 440 wells up there. We're not the largest producer, but we are one of the largest. And in last year, we paid over $350,000 just in property tax to the townships for assessment on the wells that we have and the production equipment that we use. If you prorate that number to the 10,000 or so other Antrim wells that other operators have out there, that amounts to over $8 million a year in property taxes that are paid to the township. Right now, that's predominantly to Grand Traverse County, Otsego County, Montmorency County, and those three main counties. In 2012, over $100 million the state were paid in state royalty, fees, and tax revenues. And I'll talk a little bit about that more in just a minute here. Over $150 million were paid in royalties to over 8,000 private Michigan landowners from the oil or gas that came out of the wells from the properties that they owned or the mineral rights that they owned. One of the things that our industry is very proud of is that we're able to help contribute to Michigan's outdoor heritage and natural resources through a funding mechanism called the Natural Resource Trust Fund and State Parks Endowment Funds. And that was created back in the 1970s, joint effort between our industry, legislation, and other conservation groups at that time. And we have contributed over $1.25 billion to state lands, parks, and outdoor recreation areas. Each year, we provide millions of dollars that are used in this state, that are used for purchasing like rails to trails projects, additional dunes that are picked up, additions or improvements to state parks. Overall, in Ottawa County, there's been over 65 grants given, about $30 million given to projects such as the Holland State Park, to the Rosie Mound acquisition, Ball River acquisition. We had $3.3 million given to the North Ottawa Dunes acquisition, $2 million to the Olive Shores acquisition, and other monies to Pigeon River Greenway and many, many others that made up those 65 grants. We're very proud that we can be a part of this, and we were the source that allowed this funding to be out there so that we can have future acquisitions made to further our outdoor lands and parks in the state. So that covers the jobs and economics part that I was asked to talk about. Trying to talk about natural fracturing now, or hydraulic fracturing. And again, this has been brought to the forefront, as Adam and Alan talked about, with these horizontal drilling, with hydraulic fracturing, opening up tight formations, predominantly in most states like Pennsylvania, Texas, and North Dakota, are shales. And what we're talking about, this is the kind of rock that we are fracturing. This is shale for fracturing. Alan talked about A1 carbonate. This is the kind of rock that they are looking for in those wells for A1 carbonate wells. This is a core taken from a well in Kalkaska County. It was about 6,500 feet deep. This hole here, that wasn't natural. That's something we had done in a laboratory that took it out. So this is what your oil and gas comes out of for those wells. And this shale rock, if you came up and look at it, you'd wonder how in the world can you get anything out of it. But there, in these areas that have been talked about, there's lots of natural gas in this type of rock. Or it's a source rock for other formations. There's a sandstone taken from a well in Texas. Not too many cores are taken of sandstones here in Michigan. So that's what we're talking about, the kind of rocks we're talking about fracturing and producing from. What hydraulic fracturing isn't is not the drilling end of things. Many times, natural or hydraulic fracturing is incorrectly identified with drilling a well. When there's a drilling rig on a well, there's no hydraulic fracturing going on. In fact, before any hydraulic fracturing of formations happen, that drilling rig is gone, and we either use a small rig that looks like maybe your common water well drilling unit, or sometimes we don't even have a rig out there. We're able to bring in some trucks with wire, spooled wire on it that we can use to get the fracturing done. It is a process during the completion operations of the well that we pump under high pressure, very high pressure, predominantly water, about 98% water, that has sand in it, and about 1%, maybe half to 1% of about 12 other substances and chemicals to help that process go along. Here's a picture of a fracturing operation going on a vertical well. It is like you see. There's no drilling rig out there. There's no big completion rig out there. The wellhead, actual well is right here, and this contraption on top here is what we call the wellhead, or a Christmas tree. What you can't see in the background are there's a lot of trucks, there's a lot of tanks out there that are holding the water. They're further back, and that water and sand is brought in from those tanks through these lines here, pumped up through here and down to the well. And I'll show you a little bit more details about this. Everything that we have water exposed to, 1 minute, this is going to be tough. I'm going to go on. Real quickly, well, I don't have time to talk about that. Here's a picture of Michigan with all the 50,000 wells showing on it that have been drilled. Here in Ottawa County, the wells that we're talking about, here's that well in Ionia. That well was plugged 2 weeks ago. it failed in its attempt to find any economical oil and gas. Another well here was drilled and completed by Devon. That well was plugged. Wells I believe that we're hearing about is this well here, permitted by Rosetta, same company that drilled this well and plugged it. And then you've got a couple more wells up there that, to my knowledge, that's the only activity that's going on around this area. Here's a picture of a vertical well, and I'll go on. What we do is, I'll come back to that one. I'll show you a horizontal well here. And what I'd like to point out here is that when we drill a well, we set casing and cement it all the way to surface to protect the groundwater level. We are required by DEQ laws that we cannot have our casing set anywhere in the glacial drift where your water drinking aquifers are. We have to have that cased off. We have another string of pipe that does the same thing, so you've got a second string, and then your production pipe that goes down here, it is also cased and cemented. So in this case, you're seeing 3 strings of pipe, 3 strings of cement that are protecting the groundwater. This, in general, is anywhere from 100 feet to about 600 feet deep. We have to run this at least 100 feet below there. In general, we run it about 150 to 200 feet. The depths that most of the wells with high volume fracture are in this area down here, which is about 7,000 feet deep. They are covered by very many impermeable layers of rock. When we do the fracture treatments, these fractures go anywhere from 50 to about 300 feet vertically up and vertically down. And then they're confined by the heavy weight of the shales and other impermeable rocks that are above it. This shows the casing that is run right here, the open well bore. We have to go in and do what we call perforating to open up the casing and the rock to get our frac fluid in there. Once we do that, we pump this hydraulic frac fluid in, and you get these very, very fine fractures that we then prop open with sand. If we didn't have that sand and we took the pressure off, those fractures would seal up. So that sand is in there propping open those fractures, and those fractures are probably no thicker than a width of your hair. I'm trying to speed this up here. This shows real quickly again a little closer detail of intermediate casing or surface casing that protects the water, intermediate casing that protects the water, and then lower section with your production casing and cement. Talk just a little bit, I'm very close to the end, talk about the water use that we have here. We use about 99% water. We use sand. With the sand, we have about 99.5% water and sand. And then the rest are additives, usually less than 12 additives that we have. Acids, friction reducers, surfactants to help the water go into the fractures. Chemicals that help keep the sand propped up in the fluid so it doesn't break out and plug out quick. And then other chemicals to help prevent corrosion of our drill pipe and completion steel tubulars that we have in there. Just about every one of the additives that we use are chemicals that you normally use in your household, cleaning fluids and other chemicals that you use in your house. And eventually you wash them down your drains. Here we pump them into the formation, and we will get some of this back. It will flow back. We flow back into tanks or line pits that are impermeable, that hold everything. and then we have to pump that fluid out, and we have to take it to EPA and DEQ approved special disposal wells that we have in the state. It's required by law. That's the only way we can do it. So there's nothing coming out that gets into your groundwater or gets on the ground or anything to contaminate anything. And I probably should wrap it up with that. As Adam said, we are strictly regulated by their rules. And in fact, many of the DEQ rules and guidelines that are out there for the oil and gas industry have been used as models for other states as they've developed their oil and gas programs. Michigan has a very, very good reputation for strict guidelines for the oil and gas industry. So I will quit here. Be happy afterwards to answer any questions or show you anything. And thank you for my going on and on here.
Thank you, Rodney. I'm going to apologize for two things. One, I made you give your own bio. Even though they've been very brief and very short, I apologize for that. And I know we've got somebody putting a sign up. I would appreciate it if we could be respectful towards the speakers, ask your questions, make your comments at the end, but please be respectful to speakers. And next, thank you for getting that ready. We are going to have LuAnne Kozma come up. Hey. LuAnne is the campaign director for the Committee to Ban Fracking in Michigan. She is also president of Ban Michigan Fracking. She is a longtime park and political activist and a former park commissioner and historical commissioner for the city of Novi. She also has worked 25 years at Michigan State University's museum. And Aaron, what we were about 4 or 5 minutes over on that last presentation? 5 minutes? So we'll give you an extra 5 minutes.
Great, thank you. Is that working? Good. Yes, I'm from Charlevoix now. I just recently moved there up north. But for most of my adult life here in Michigan, I've lived in Oakland County in Novi and worked at Michigan State University. Before that, I lived in New Jersey, where as a kid I was very much an environmentalist and helped, in a small way anyway, save the Delaware River from becoming dammed up with hydroelectric dam back in the 70s, and then I came here to Michigan State to study parks and recreation. So I've been involved in a lot of park lawsuits and tried to protect parks for a real long time. What I'm going to tell you today is why we must ban fracking and talk about some of the environmental impacts and harmful effects of fracking. First of all, I should say that even though they invited me here as committee to ban fracking, because I'm also part of the group Ban Michigan Fracking, which is our nonprofit educational advocacy organization, I'm kind of wearing 2 hats here today, because the Committee to Ban Fracking in Michigan is a ballot question committee that is doing a petition drive to put it on the ballot, so it's an election process. So I'll talk about both those things. And I'm just an informed citizen. I've been doing research and been active on this issue now for almost 3 years when I first found out about it. And I've traveled to New York City to testify at a New York City council hearing. I've taken part in conferences in New York and have networked a lot with other people around the country that are also very interested in banning fracking. We already know that it cannot be made safe and that it's not safe. The DEQ really is here to protect the industry and foster the industry. I will elaborate on that later. And as far as oil and gas goes, they are not here to look out for people or the environment. In fact, it's the exact opposite. And I'll elaborate on this too. As some of the other speakers have said, you know, the process involves injecting water, lots of it, real lots of it, and Ban Michigan Fracking was the group that exposed that whole thing, that they really aren't using just 5 to 8 million gallons, it's more like 21 to 31 million gallons per frac, enormous amounts of water. And it's not just that the water is used, but then that water, as they would well acknowledge, is now frac waste. And that frac waste does in fact stay in the ground, as we just heard, Some of it stays in the casing of the frac well, and some of it then is removed and then brought to quote, proper disposal wells where they, again, are injected back into the earth. And I always pictured them kind of like a container at the bottom, but no, they just are going deep into the earth, into a formation. And of course the casings, we can talk about that a little bit. And then there are, so it inherently pollutes all of that water. That is, pollution of the water is part of the process. They acknowledge that. They have to use the water, they toxify it with chemicals, and they push it into the ground. And then there are the accidents or spills or the blowouts and all these other things that happen as all of the different parts of the industry, whether it's the trucking firms or the pipelines or the condenser stations or the compressor parts of the operation, all of these things are on the surface, and there are many different things that can go wrong. And then finally, maybe not finally, it's worse for global warming than any other fossil fuel. We hear about how it burns safe, but it's overall not safe. So I won't be able to touch on all of these in any great detail, of course, but there have been water contamination proven cases in other parts of the country. Pavilion, Wyoming, the EPA, not too long ago, did make the direct link between the horizontal fracking going on there by Encana, and Encana is the main fracker here in Michigan. And now the EPA is pulling back. They're doing a U-turn and just abandoning that study. So something is going on. Water shortages. It's sort of happening here already in Michigan. We really take our water for granted here, don't we? We have so much in comparison to so many other places. But out west, water shortages are dire, and of course, states are literally going up in flames. There's not enough water. I've often said there's not enough water on the whole planet, I think, to frack everywhere they want to frack. And I'm beginning to think that might actually be more true than not. And then well casings fail. The industry itself knows this. There's a very good short video called "The Sky is Pink" by Josh Fox, who also did, he was the director of the movie Gasland, that shows a couple of nice, quick examples of how, in fact, industry knows that their casings fail, and some of them fail sooner, and some of them fail later, and some of them fail much later, but all of them eventually will fail. And these are the things that need to last forever in order to protect our groundwater. And as it turns out, the gas industry is also keeping, is hiring the same PR firm that the tobacco industry used for many, many years, and they're using the same playbook that cigarettes are safe, fracking is safe. And we know from some studies now that it is harmful to animals. Of course, we're animals. Air contamination is another huge part of this, even though I can't talk about it with any great detail myself. But we do know from many other anecdotal studies or examples that, especially in the movie Gasland, you can see a lot of people who are experiencing their health effects are doing so because of the air quality. People are having nosebleeds. These are the pathways to contamination through our bodies, through food, through air, through water. And the human health risks are really enormous. There's recently been a second study by Duke University that proved that yes, in southwest Pennsylvania, methane is getting in the water where they're drilling and fracking. And of course, these chemicals are really not benign. Some of them, not all of them, but some of them really are toxic chemicals that are dangerous to humans. And then finally, you've heard of the earthquake swarms that are going on in different states, Oklahoma, Arkansas, other places. Ohio had a few, and these are from injection wells, and yes, there are studies that show that there's a direct link. You really should hear this man named Dr. Tony Ingraffi. He used to work for the oil industry and is a rock scientist, and now he has turned completely against this process and is part of a group called Physicians, Scientists, and Engineers for Healthy Energy. And he has this great YouTube video. You can take a look at it another time. But the standout thing that he says in this whole video, what he's trying to get across, is that when you look at the entire extraction process for development of natural gas from beginning to end, from all the pipelines and all the methane leakage that's going on every step of the way, when you look at everything, it is actually worse for climate change or global warming than oil or gas or coal. I don't know what else could be more serious. According to another really good source, which is TEDx, the Endocrine Disruption Exchange. Dr. Theo Colburn is a part of this organization, and I think she's a chemist, but I think there's more to it than that. This is just one little point in their fantastic website, and that is toxic chemicals are used at every stage of development to reach and release the gas. And here's another. Most chemicals found in the drilling muds, a lot of times we're not thinking about these drilling muds, but in Michigan, those drilling muds are going to public landfills, and or they are being solidified on site. So again, and these are considered hazardous waste normally by Superfund law, but because these are exempted, they're not. I'm glad to hear the DEQ finally admitting that they are in fact using these, the reality of the water that they're using is 21 to 31 million gallons per frac. Take a look at Ban Michigan Fracking's website for that story. We called it Michigan's 21 million gallon frac job, and we report on how we uncovered that information and how unwilling they were to even admit it. We actually got it from industry itself. It's self-reported from Frac Focus. We got emails from Frac Focus, and yes, they were using that much water. And you can't just take studies' words for it. You have to listen to people who really are being affected by the drilling. I'm not one of those people. I don't live in Pennsylvania where there are thousands of frac wells, or Colorado or Wyoming where there are, but you really do need to hear the stories of those people. This is just one little example of how people are dealing with the health effects. There's an organization called Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project, which is spending all of its time, these are doctors and nurses and clinicians who are seeing people every day with health effects, serious health effects, from living in a gas field, from living across the street from it, living miles away from it. So drinking the water, it's in their community. And so it's not only that, but in their homes. And now what they're talking about, the advice they give to these folks is, well, you can't avoid it, but you're just trying to, the best you can do is try to create barriers between its pathway and your body. That's all you can do. Take a look at that website. And I'm not the only one who wants to ban fracking. A lot of people in Michigan want to, and it's a growing opinion. And other places are also concerned about the health effects and the environmental effects, and have banned fracking. And it can be done. And what do they know what we don't? They're worried just like we are. The New Jersey legislature, that is the elected officials, the elected state senators and representatives, banned fracking a couple years ago, but then Governor Christie modified it to a temporary measure. They are trying again, the legislators, not the citizens even, the legislators, are trying to stop fracking, frac waste from coming to Michigan, New Jersey. I'm very proud of them because I'm from New Jersey. And then Vermont has banned fracking in 2012, so they are kind of down to the first state to really do it. Other entire countries are doing it. Bulgaria and France are just two examples. Numerous towns and cities have banned it, including Pittsburgh and Buffalo. And they're using different kinds of legal methods. I'm sure these guys will, the next speakers will be talking about that, but and I won't because there's just too much to cover. But there are different methods of doing so, and other cities are leading the way. Which leads us to what we can do here in Michigan. We're just regular citizens, we're informed citizens, but we do have the power of the vote. We do have the power to influence our elected officials and our fellow citizens, and that's what we're trying to do. We feel that by banning fracking and putting it into the state law is a very reasonable way to go. We tried last year to do a constitutional amendment to ban fracking, and we decided to go this way instead this year. And we're glad we did, because it takes on another couple of points that we're able to do by doing it this way. And that is, well, first of all, we're going to prohibit horizontal hydraulic fracturing, and we use the definition by the American Petroleum Institute. We're not making it up on our own, we're using industry's own definition. We're also going to prohibit storage, disposal, and processing of horizontal hydraulic fracturing wastes from coming here from other states. This is a really key issue. Pennsylvania has hardly any of those injection wells, and yet they're creating all that waste. They're shipping it over to Ohio. Ohio is filling up, their injection wells are filling up, and there's no more other places for it to go. They're building more. We've got more than Ohio, and it's not too far of a stretch of the imagination to expect that some of these wastes from other states are going to head our way unless we ban that as well. And then here's the thing that I don't think I've ever seen in any DEQ presentations, is that we're also going to take on, eliminate just a phrase and a sentence or two in the existing law that's been on the books since 1939 that officially states that the state's policy should be that the DEQ in particular should foster the oil and gas industry along the most favorable conditions with a view to the maximum production of oil and gas. And I'll point that out one more time. My slides are a little out of order for my mind. This is a statewide effort, I should say. It's also, it's a political campaign, but it's also nonpartisan. So it's not, being run by any one party, and any organization can endorse it, and because it's not actually lobbying elected officials, it's not lobbying at all, it's influencing each other voters, to do the right thing. We need signatures by October 1, and then the ballot issue would actually be in 2014. You know what? I feel like there's something missing from my, yeah, I think there is. Did a slide disappear here? One with the red. Okay. That's interesting. You guys took it out? The one with the red marks? Okay, I'll read it to you. I really don't appreciate that, because we argued about that. And,
wow.
This is, if I didn't apologize. This is what our petition looks like, and I've already kind of mentioned the fostering the industry. There's a part of it called construction of part, and it says, it's long been declared the policy of the state to foster the conservation of natural resources so that our citizens may continue to enjoy the fruits and profits of those resources. We're proposing to remove this part of the language that we think really speaks to the heart of the matter as to why the DEQ is really not so much yes, they're the regulatory agency, but they are also in partnership in several ways with the industry itself. Number one, they also receive money from the profits from the production of oil and gas, and that is something that is worked out not in this statute but in another written statement or memorandum. The part that I think can get under a lot of people's skin is to see that kind of language, that special interest language that protects industry. So again, the DEQ, the department, is to foster the development of the industry along the most favorable conditions and with a view to the ultimate recovery of the maximum production of these natural products. And so the amended version of that would remove that, what I just said, and it would continue to say, this part is to be construed liberally to give effect to sound policies of conservation and the prevention of waste and exploitation. That's already in the law, not changing that. And then we're adding the words, and to protect human health and water. That's what the DEQ should be doing. They should be looking out for human health and water, not protecting and favoring the gas industry, maximizing production. In 1939, maybe that made sense. Maybe when there were, when gas migrated and was fluid and was going from one pocket to another, they were actually reservoirs, not hard rock that you had to blast through. like they're doing now, with horizontal hydraulic fracturing, with unconventional fracturing, maybe that made sense, so that it was maximizing the production and there weren't so many rigs and you weren't stealing your oil and you weren't stealing her oil. And but now it means a completely different thing. It's really like saying frack baby frack, because everywhere they go, they find it. The entire lower peninsula has that bedrock that is frackable. The entire lower peninsula is going to be fracked. So we can do something about it. What is our future? This is, I'll go back to my little pictures. They really like to tout regulation, that regulation is going to save us, but regulation doesn't protect us, it only mitigates the damage afterwards. It just makes people pay for damages perhaps, or it's fine. You know, they're talking about the very few regulations they've got on the books right now, like, you know, maybe looking at the water withdrawal, but that doesn't even look at cumulative effects. It's really kind of a nothing burger. So they like to put it out there, but they use it, it fails, they permit the wells anyway. And now we know why they permit the wells. They have to foster the industry on the most favorable conditions, the maximum production, ultimate recovery of these natural products. So this is what it looks like with regulated fracking. Please tell me if you see any difference. And then this is what we have and what we need to protect. And you know, we all have families. Guys in the gas and oil industry do too. And we're all looking out for each other when we want to do something like this. This is not something that we're trying to harm economically. We're trying to protect our state, protect our people, protect, and that means prevent harm. You can only do that by preventing it. Other states are getting it, and we need to get it too. So ways to find out more, and these are just a few. There are a lot of good websites out there. I just wanted to put a few Michigan ones up there. Let'sBanFracking.org is the committee to ban fracking in Michigan. And Ban Michigan Fracking I mentioned. MLAWD is Michigan Land and Air Water Defense, which is a group in this part of the state that is suing the DNR over leasing out some public parklands. RespectMyPlanet.org is where you can see pictures of all the frack wells going on right now and the permits. I started doing that on Ban Michigan Fracking. How many minutes do I have?
You're down to about a half a minute.
Half a minute, all right, good. And then I kind of quit. So RespectMyPlanet.org has a more comprehensive, up-to-date listing if you want to know where the nearest frack wells are. Far Watershed is actually in the northeast side of the state. And then there are a lot of other good sources, but just quickly, the few I mentioned earlier today were the Endocrine Disruptor Exchange, which talks about all the different chemicals. I forgot to mention, I wanted to rebut what he had said about, it's actually more like 900 products and over something like 600 chemicals. Of course I can't find it, and these are 944 products, 632 chemicals. More than 75% of them can affect the skin, eyes, other sensory organs, and the respiratory and gastrointestinal systems. Approximately 40 to 50% could affect the brain nervous system, the immune and cardiovascular systems, the kidneys. 37% could affect the endocrine system. 25% could cause cancer and mutations. Take a look at their website. It's really pretty good. Physicians, Scientists, and Engineers for Healthy Energy, another really fantastic website. And ShaleShock.org is a citizens organization, also Marcellus Protest, which is in Pennsylvania. These folks have been doing numerous videos, really getting the word out about, they've been battling this for a long time. They've been at it way longer than us, and they have stuff to tell us. Ban Michigan Fracking brought out, last year we brought Canadian scientist Jessica Ernst, who is suing Encana over fracking contamination in Alberta, Canada. And she was telling the story, Encana's going to frack you bad. You really need to pay attention to what they did to Canada. You need to pay attention to what they're going to do here. And this list of the harmed is another, again, kind of a compilation of studies and anecdotes and newspaper reports about people and animals. places, businesses that have been harmed by gas drilling. I think that's it. I forgot one
LuAnne,
thing.
could you wait until the questions?
Okay, yeah, I'll bring it
Because
up.
we're already over. Thank you. And I've got to apologize for LuAnne now. The only person I have to apologize is to my wife in the room, and I'm sure I won't be by the end of the night. But anyway, the slide she was referencing is on page 4 of her handout at the top. There were last-minute changes made to the presentation about 4 o'clock. I think that one got accidentally deleted. So anyway, it's on page 4 of your presentation. I don't think there's a presentation for today. Handout. So our next presenters are from a local law firm, Skolton and Fant. They are going to be speaking about local unit of government regulatory authority or the limit thereof. And our 2 attorneys are Rodney Shermer and Jessica Denoyers. And Rodney is graduated from the State University of New York at Buffalo in 1977. He is a member of the Ottawa County Bar, the Federal Bar Association, State Bar of Michigan. His practice areas are commercial litigation, municipal, banking, and bankruptcy law. And Jessica is a graduate of Thomas M. Cooley Law School. She also is a member of the State Bar, and her practice areas are estate planning, business law, and municipal law. So, Rodney, are you starting first? They do work if you'd like to present from there. Ken.
We don't have a PowerPoint.
Okay. Are you guys able to hear up back there? Okay, I'm going to pass the mic down to you.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Okay, my name is Rodney Shermer.
Rodney, I'm going to give you the handheld. Yep.
Okay, my name is Rodney Shermer, and with the law firm of Skolton & Fant, we have offices in Grand Haven and Holland. A large portion of our firm's work is municipal work here in Ottawa counties and other counties in the state. I've been asked by the Ottawa County Planning Commission to...
Rodney, I'm sorry. Some of the members in the back can't see you, and they're asking if you could stand up.
I don't know if I'm worth looking at, but let's try it this way then. We've been asked to present a little discussion with regard to local regulation, which is kind of an interesting idea because historically oil and gas wells and their accessory facilities have not really been addressed locally. It's been a matter that has always been left to the state as either having some exclusive jurisdiction with Adams Group or some primary jurisdiction with regard to those matters. So a large amount of what goes on here today is probably an unsettled issue in the law. Let me ask first of all, how many township, village, city members do we have here in the audience? Okay, quite a few. How many of you have been asked recently or within the last few years about oil and gas? A few of you have. Okay, let me point out that I want to begin my discussion with the end of your handout. This applies to, I guess, everyone. Item Roman numeral 10 on the last page of the handout says, consult with your municipal attorney or considering any matter. And again, why? Because with regard to municipalities and anybody wanting to deal with the municipalities on these issues, again, it's a very unsettled area of law. The interest in fracking, again, is fairly new here And why is it being approached? And it's more new with regard to local involvement. People come to their townships, their villages, their city, their commissions, city commission, village council, township board, because they want to address local issues of their community concern. And these bodies are the ones that are accessible to them. These bodies share the same community with those people. And you can go to a meeting and you can raise some issues and you can file some petitions to take some action. And that's not stuff you can do easily with the state legislature or before the DEQ. So it does get presented. And then the concern is what do we do with it then? And the problem is, like I say, historically, those matters have been left to the state. And people are starting to see if the local municipalities have any way to do something on their own. In Michigan, that is very, very limited. On the first page of the little outline, I just put together a couple of the state authority provisions in the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act and also in the Natural Gas Act. These give essentially most, if not all, authority to the supervisor of wells with regard to anything having to do with wells, the production, the location, the operation, whatever. And then the second one ties into the fact that the Public Service Commission, to a great degree, deals with how that natural gas is transported. They are the ones who consider and approve where the pipelines come in and out of your township or on land in your township, and what facilities can be built there. With that sort of a background, the local regulation is severely limited because that constitutes a situation where a local ordinance or regulations will be preempted by the state law. And again, we're really behind, but on Roman numeral 2, there's a kind of a listing of what the courts have considered when is a local ordinance preempted. And I won't spend a lot of time to go through there, but there are some places, like the first one that says, where state law expressly provides that the state's authority to regulate a specific area of the law is to be exclusive. And by and large, the supervisor of wells authority is exclusive to the oil and gas wells. And then the second and the third are other ways to do it, where the state regulation essentially occupies the field of regulation. The state has statutes for oil and gas, transmission for natural gas, and each of the Public Service Commission and the department, the MDEQ, have rules and regulations that they've adopted for those. Fairly extensive regulations. You've heard the prior speakers talking about the amount of regulations that the industry has to safeguard or to promote the use of wells for the extraction of minerals or gas in the state. Unlike some things, there's no provisions that I'm aware of in those laws that say a local ordinance or local government can adopt an ordinance that is similar to this and can be more restrictive, but can't be less restrictive. Now, some of you around here who are municipal members who live along, whose communities are along lake, you'll remember there was a critical dune act that some of you operated under for a while. And the Critical Dune Act had a provision in there that essentially said a local unit of government can adopt an ordinance regulating critical dunes as long as it followed our model ordinance that the state had and could be less or more restrictive, but not less restrictive. Nothing like that is in any kind of this language that indicates the state has considered under these provisions of preemption that local units can govern. And then the main one is also on 5 under Roman numeral 2 that talks about the conflict, the direct conflict with state law. And it's where a local ordinance permits what a statute prohibits, or the ordinance prohibits what a statute permits. The ordinance loses because state law is higher. Now, there's a couple of ways that people may look at this in terms of, well, how, if we can, do we regulate? And one of them is a zoning regulation. In Roman numeral 3 there, I've quoted the provision, the applicable provision from the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act. And that essentially says that a county or a township shall not regulate or control the drilling, completion, or operation of oil and gas wells, and shall not have jurisdiction with reference to the issuance of permits for location, drilling, completion, operation, or abandonment of such wells. So those of you who are out here with counties and townships, be advised that and you have been, this is nothing new. Township Rural Zoning Act for years had this provision in it. So this is nothing new. You have no jurisdiction to zone with regard to wells. And you notice that it talks about counties and townships. Cities and villages are not expressly preempted. With regard to the counties and townships, that's a preemption under Roman numeral 2:1. That's express. With regard to cities and villages, there's a question there because they aren't included. Can the city of Grand Haven, can the city of Zeeland or Holland, can those municipalities zone out oil wells? Now, that's an interesting question, and one of the things that's unsettled in the law, because it still could fall under either one of the other bases for saying it's preempted. That the field of oil and gas regulation is totally occupied by the state, or it demands exclusive state regulation in order to have a uniform application of the laws across the state to foster the state's interests. Also, even if you're a city or a village and you have the ability to zone, or you want to try and take it, the city and village people who do zoning work here also know that the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act does not allow you to exclusionary zone, to in effect say you can't have this particular use anywhere within the municipality unless there's a very substantial reason for it and that's available elsewhere. The most important thing is with regard to, all right, when you talk about this jurisdiction, is there anything that is left over that still could be zoned? And there was a case back in 1990 from the Supreme Court which indicated that the supervisor of wells authority only applied to gas and oil wells and not other aspects of the production process. which means what? People thought it left open the possibility of saying, okay, the municipality can still zone for some things like a compression station on it, pipelines, although that case didn't involve the Public Service Commission rules, and access roads. Those, again, it's not clear what accessory or ancillary uses are not included in zoning and the regulatory exclusive power of the supervisor of wells.
Rodney, we've got about 2 minutes left, and I know you got one more speaker from your firm.
Okay. Police power ordinances will go by, and Jessica said she talks fast anyway. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jessica.
Hi, goodbye.
So I'm here to talk about what can a municipality do. I'm starting on number 5. Basically not a lot. What there's a lot of is uncertainty at this point. There are 2 areas, and I'm going to go fast here just so we can get through it, but you have the handout. There are 2 areas where we're pretty sure you have jurisdiction to regulate, and that's within the roads that are in your jurisdiction. Now, the regulations must be reasonable, and in the legal field, reasonableness is just fun because it's very vague and it's defined by a bunch of very vague terms. It's fair and appropriate under usual and ordinary circumstances. So have fun with that one. You also should consider when you're rerouting, truck routes or anything like that, the residual impacts. Where are you sending those trucks to, and what is that going to have? What impact is that going to have on the places that you're sending them to? The other area we feel you should be able to regulate are pipelines within the road right-of-way. And again, you can't unreasonably deny placement of any pipelines. So now on to the next section, which is the questionable regulations. This is areas that it's really kind of, well, it's unsettled, not kind of unsettled, it's unsettled. So it will just take the issues being tested for us to determine what you can do. Ronnie kind of touched on pipelines a little bit, so I'll skip past that one. Earth change and soil erosion ordinances probably exist in most municipalities already. The state grants some authority for municipalities to act, but if the supervisor of wells is already active, it's preempted. Under number 3, regulation of noise, dust, odor, etc., it's also likely preempted as the supervisor of wells generally has jurisdiction there. And often these regulations end up being very, very vague, and that's ultimately unconstitutional because they can't be void for vagueness. And any ordinances that you have at all, it cannot effectively prohibit production. So you can't say, no loud noises between 12:01 a.m. and 11:45 p.m. and have that pass. Finally, well water regulation, probably also under the supervisor of wells. Seeing a trend here, municipality, some people already talked a little bit about encouraging recycling or the aquifers. But again, like we've said, I must be the most useless speaker up here. It's all unsettled, so there are no bright line rules. I have a couple notes about pending legislation. There were a group of bills that were just introduced last week. However, as you'll see under Roman numeral 7, item numbers 2 and 3, there were 2 bills introduced in the beginning of the year that haven't had any movement. So, citizen initiatives, LuAnne talked a little bit about that. Incidental matters, these are all just things under Roman numeral 9 for you to think about when these might be coming into your communities, other areas that you should regulate, impacts, that sort of thing. And finally, full circle, consult your friendly municipal attorney. Thank you.
Thank you.
With MSUE, he's a farm management educator. He's worked for over 25 years in private industry as a professional farm manager. In this profession, he obtained his experience with and in the oil and gas industry. and he has been very active, I know, with a lot of farmers and negotiating leases and the components thereof. So Curtis, without further ado.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I did want to mention that this is the second meeting that MSU Extension has held regarding oil and gas in your county. The first one we did was back in November of 2012 in Olive Township. Many of you here probably know Adam Kantrovich. He's my counterpart that works here in Ottawa County. He was heavily involved with that meeting also, and Adam's here tonight. So we've been, and the Extension started having meetings like this in 2010 when oil and gas leasing really started increasing across the state. So we've been holding meetings similar to this since 2010 across the state to help educate the public about what you're listening to tonight. Now, environmental protection, well, let me back up just a hair. Everything regarding oil and gas starts with the mineral right owner. Owning mineral rights is a real blessing because you can earn as much or more from your mineral rights as you do the surface of your property if you know the rules of the game for oil and gas development. So owning the mineral rights is a blessing. It all starts with the landowner. The landowner has the decision whether or not they want to lease their mineral rights or whether they don't. And a lot of that relates back to what your goals are for your property. And if one of your goals is groundwater protection, the American Petroleum Institute has established already industry best practices that deal with protecting the groundwater. And I write a quarterly newsletter for anyone that's interested in the September 2012 issue. I talk about these standards. You can look them up, find them for yourself. I'm going to go through a few of these tonight because the industry has the standards that they recommend should be used if you want to protect your groundwater. But it's not offered in what they call the standard lease. Leasing mineral rights is just like any other business transaction. The person that writes the contract writes it to benefit them. That's just the way business works. The oil and gas company comes to you to lease your mineral rights. They have a contract that they offer the landowner. And the contract is written by oil and gas attorneys, so it's very difficult to understand. But that's one reason Extension does what we're doing, and we're going to get into the very beginning of it tonight. So a lot of what I'm talking about is not available in the standard lease. The landowner has to learn, they have to ask for this. But it can be done. And one of them is water protection. One of the suggestions is, if you want to protect your water, get the oil and gas company to agree to the testing. And the first test you want to make is before any type of drilling occurs. Because you want to test your water to get a baseline sample of what your water quality is before any oil and gas development occurs, so that you've got a documentation of this is what my water quality was in quantity. Now let's see what happens during the drilling, and if it changes, then we've got to go a little further. So you test before you start drilling, you test right after hydraulic fracturing, and then you test 6 months later. And what you want to test for is the materials, some of the materials that are used in the hydraulic fracturing process. So you're not just testing for like nitrogen that can be in groundwater in many places. You want to test for things that could have gotten there from the hydraulic fracturing. So they recommend you test for benzene, toluene, petroleum hydrocarbons. It's got to be a special test for these kinds of things because a normal water test does not test for these. And the list of chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing is on the drilling site. So the DEQ knows what chemicals are being used in that fracture, and that's another good source to use to decide what chemicals you want to test for. Now here is some language that's out of an actual lease that was done here in Michigan. It deals with water protection. It says, if such tests reflect a material adverse change in the lessor's water, which is landowner, quality or quantity, then it shall be presumed that the same was caused by the lessee. Lessee's oil and gas company. So this is an actual oil and gas lease in Calhoun County. The oil and gas company is saying, we agree to cooperate with the testing, and if there's a change in quality or quantity, we will presume it was due to our actions. So this type of information, these types of regulations can be put in your lease if you know to ask for it and negotiate it. And very important, you've got to use the proper procedures. If you don't use the proper procedures, a good attorney is going to say, well, you didn't use the right procedure, you contaminated the sample. So you've got to do it right if you're going to sample. Now I'm talking about right now. I've got 15 minutes to talk about what I usually present in 45 minutes. So I'm talking about environmental type issues that landowners need to be aware of. And when I talk about the standard lease, every company has that standard lease they give to the landowner, and it's up to the landowner to decide if they want to sign that, reject it, or amend it. So in the standard lease, if you're concerned about maintaining the integrity of your topsoil, the standard lease allows pipelines to be put above plow depth. Now whether or not the company will actually do that, you don't know. But landowners have learned in an addendum require the pipelines be put 36 inches deep, 48 inches deep. They will do this. Companies will do this if they're willing to negotiate at all. What about drainage tile? You know, the standard lease says they will pay damages to growing crops. Well, if you're a landowner, you may have drainage tile, you may have sprinkler systems, you may have culverts. You know, these are things that can be roadways. These are things that can be damaged accidentally, and if it's not in your lease, you have a heck of a time fighting to get paid for those damages. Prevention is always worth a pound to cure, and if you're a landowner, it's the same situation with oil and gas leasing. The standard lease, and what I'm talking about is right in the lease. I mean, they're not trying to hide anything. It's all right there. It's up to the landowner to learn what that lease means so you can decide whether or not you want to sign it or you want it changed. Now, in the standard lease, it says they will not put any an oil and gas well within 200 feet of your house or a building. Well, if you don't like that, you can negotiate further away. You can negotiate non-development areas. In fact, there's a non-development lease that I talk about in my normal presentations. Lots of options for landowners. No topsoil segregation. If you're a farmer, well, how many people are farmers in here? Any farmers? Okay, did you buy your land because it had productive subsoil? You probably didn't. Well, if you don't segregate topsoil, you try to farm in the subsoil. And here's an example, eastern Colorado. It's a oil drilling site. There's the oil well. What is missing in this picture is they should have a pile of topsoil. And if you look at a lot of the road construction and industrial construction sites, even in Michigan, a lot of times you'll see a big pile of topsoil somewhere on the site. So they've learned to do this. The more progressive oil and gas companies have learned to do this because it reduces the cost to reclaim the property and it actually saves them money, along with making it more farmable for you. So here's a guy, when they go to reclaim that, he's going to have to start trying to farm into subsoil. So can you picture him planting crops into that every year, spending all that money and losing money on that site because he's trying to grow crops in subsoil? It can easily be changed if you know what to ask for. So the standard lease offers privileges and easements useful or convenient. Well, who is it useful or convenient for? It's going to be useful or convenient for the company. If you know you can change that, you can ask for input into, and actually you can demand in writing in the addendum to the lease that the landowner has to have input into the siting of the roads, the drilling site, where pipelines go. The landowner can have a lot of input into the siting, and the good oil and gas companies do not want angry landowners. You know, they want the landowner they work with to be happy. But there again, you've got to negotiate it and have it in writing, because anything that is said is not going to happen unless it's in writing in your lease addendum. We talked. You heard a speaker tonight talk about brine disposal. Well, brine, well, the standard lease mentions that the company can dispose of water, brine, or other fluids on your property. And it's in the granting clause, which is the first paragraph, so that means they can do it for free. Well, some landowners don't even want to consider an injection well, which that could be, on their property. And even if they do consider it, if they amend the lease to say that these types of facilities will only be allowed upon owner's written consent, you can get paid separately for that. And you can be paid handsomely for an injection well if you want to allow it. You know, the easements affect pipelines. There's going to be pipelines if there's oil and gas development in your area. The standard lease says that any pipeline put in, they can do for free. Well, if you know the rules of the game on rights-of-ways, you know that many of the pipelines that go in, you can charge a right-of-way for. And these pipelines, you can charge so much per foot. So it can be, there again, handsome additional income for a landowner if they know the rules of the game. It was mentioned tonight, a lot of natural gas is stored in Michigan. In fact, Michigan stores more underground natural gas than any state in the country. The standard lease says they can store that gas for free. Now that is not producing oil and gas. Storing it is putting it back. You want them to be bringing it out. You can be paid pretty well for storing gas if you change the lease to say storage of gas will not be allowed. As simple as that. Just got to know the rules of the game. Now this is a picture of a well out in Pennsylvania in Marcellus Shale that's being hydraulically fractured. So the drilling rig has already come and gone. So now they're fracturing, and the point I want to make is, and this was brought up before, there is a lot of truck traffic. So you as the landowner need to think about, okay, where is this road going to come through my property? Where is the company going to get access to my property? How wide are the roads going to be allowed? Are they going to be all-weather roads? Because you see we have some mud here. What do you do if you're out in the country and you come across a mud hole? Do you go through it? Or do you go around it? Okay, if you've got about 500 trucks going into your property and they're all going around it in a different place, you've got some major impacts. So that's why we hold these meetings, to make you aware of these kinds of things. So there's going to be impacts. So don't sign an oil and gas lease if you don't expect any impacts. You know, leasing is a choice. You don't have to sign the lease if you're offered the lease. And that's why you get paid a royalty. And in my normal presentation, we talk a lot about the royalty because you can make very good income from your royalty, but you have some trade-offs. There's always trade-offs in everything we do. Now, Adam wanted me to put this slide in on compulsory pooling, and the reason why I do is because when you're dealing with an oil and gas lease, you're dealing with a landman. The oil and gas company sends a representative to negotiate the lease with you, or ask you to sign the lease. Well, one of the things they use a lot is they say, well, if you don't sign the lease, we'll just take you to court, and the supervisor of wells will make you lease. Well, actually, what they're talking about is compulsory pooling. And the landman makes it sound like it's a very bad deal for the landowner, but actually, it's much better for the landowner than the standard lease they're usually offering you. For example, it's not a lease. The supervisor of wells ordered that, let's say you have 80 acres, they need 10 acres of your land to get enough land for a drilling permit for a well. So he'll order 10 of your acres will be brought into this oil well. So they're not going to take your whole 80 acres, they're just going to use the amount of acreage they need for a well. The bonus is that cash payment they offer you to sign the lease. If you're compulsory pooled, you don't get the bonus. But your royalty begins, and like I say, I go into this in more detail in my normal presentations, but you get paid a royalty just like any other lessee. You receive a royalty based on gross income, whereas the standard lease pays you a royalty based on net income. And the oil and gas company calculates the net. And they do that by charging post-production costs for handling the material after it comes out of the ground. So already, compulsory pooling pays you more than the standard lease because you're getting a royalty based on gross income instead of net income. And I'm not going to go into the details of what a working interest owner is, but I do that in my normal presentations. So what you end up doing is you actually end up buying your share of the well. So what can happen is that you can end up owning your share of the well. So once the well is paid for, you not only get your 1/8, you get additional royalties for your ownership in the well. So that's where compulsory pooling really is not such a bad deal. And many landowners, when the landman tells them they can take them to court, the landowner just gives up and signs that standard lease because they didn't know they have some other options. A lot of times the landman will tell them, if you don't sign the lease, you're going to ruin it for your neighbors because everybody else has already signed it. Well, this allows you to not ruin it for your neighbor if you don't want to sign a lease. So here's some of the resources. One thing I heard some of the speakers say I wanted to mention, this might help you understand hydraulic fracturing a little better. When a well is hydraulically fractured, that's designed to be a once-in-a-lifetime event. You know, the millions of gallons of water are not used every year. It's a one time to develop the well. And after the well is developed, they don't need that water anymore. So I just want to bring that up to you. We did a meeting in Berry County for the Pierce Creek Institute, and they recorded my presentation, so it's on YouTube. You can look at that if you want more information about oil and gas leasing. The state of Michigan oil and gas lease has a lot of the things we recommend landowners have in their leases. You can get this on our website, which I have right up there. A list of oil and gas attorneys. As I mentioned, if there's pipelines, you need to know the rules of the game for rights of ways. And I think I'm going to stop right there. Okay. There's a lot of questions.
Thank you for this. Pam's going to see if we can get these speakers working. I'm going to ask the speakers first because we are about a half hour over on time. We expected to start questions at 8:30. Do you all have time to stick around for a little while and answer questions? Wonderful, thank you. And I guess I give you guys the opportunity at this point, if you'd like to leave, you can. Otherwise, we are going to have a question and answer period now. And yes, sir. You have a question? Okay, first of all, has anybody written questions down? Can you pass those to the outside of your row, and whoever has those, just keep your hand up, and we'll have staff collect those. And I'll let you start.
The water issue always seems to be at the forefront of all these questions. And my understanding is, isn't there actually, once natural gas is burnt, isn't there actually a net gain of water? Since the burning of natural gas creates water. Is that true or not true? Who would be best suited?
I can take that. That's true. When you combust natural gas, I believe 90 cubic feet of natural gas combustion creates 1 gallon of water. We've done some initial calculations. Some of the larger Buchanan wells up north, theoretically, well, not theoretical, the combustion of that gas will create the same amount of water that was used to frack it within probably about 3 years. So you do get that exchange, so it's a net wash. But the rub, I think, for a lot of people is that it's disposed of, and it's not. It's disposed of, it's taken out of one watershed, it's disposed of in ground, and it doesn't necessarily come back to the same watershed that it was taken from.
So it goes to the worldwide water cycle,
Correct.
but not to that particular watershed.
That's correct, and that's not unlike vegetables that are grown, water, bottled water. It's not the only industry, but again, that doesn't sit well with a lot of folks.
If you can wait, we're going to keep this orderly. I do not want to get into a debate because we will not get through the questions tonight. I'm going to go back and forth between the audience and questions that we're receiving. And I know this has been a big one. We just did a study with MSU on our aquifers in Ottawa County, glacial and the bedrock aquifers. And we are finding that in certain areas of the county, we are actually mining the water. We are using it at a greater rate than it's being replenished. What is being done or what will be done by the oil and gas industry and maybe DEQ, if anything, to protect the water? And will the water be coming out of the aquifers, and how will the limited water we have be protected? I guess Adam or Richard?
Yeah, I can take that. And I didn't get a chance to talk about this in our presentation, but how the DEQ evaluates water withdrawals is sort of twofold. We have a water withdrawal assessment tool that is run to evaluate large volume water withdrawals over 100,000 gallons. And what that principally looks at is the base flow of streams, so impact of those streams. They're not low at such point that you're impacting the aquatic fisheries. And secondly, if there's water wells in the area, we have a requirement that they place monitoring wells and monitor static water levels, water level drawdowns during and after the hydraulic fracturing operation till the time when that aquifer is restored and stabilized, rebounds. If there's an adverse impact indicated by the use of that tool, the state doesn't allow those withdrawals. If you're coming up to that adverse impact line, we also require, if it's a caution, if it's anything other than a green zone A proceed, we require what's called a site-specific review, where the company has to provide more detailed information to ensure that there's not going to be impacts to those aquatic resources. In addition to that, we have the ability to require additional hydrogeological investigations, aquifer pump tests. Quite often we don't have to do that because it doesn't show that there's an impact. But in this case, if you're in an area and it's known that you've got some water shortage issues and studies going on, that's a prime area where you would probably have to consider requiring some of those extra tests to ensure that you're not going to cause an adverse impact to that groundwater.
And who would request that? The local unit? or the property owner?
Well, the state of Michigan would require it.
Okay, you would require it, okay. Thank you.
That's not quite everything. All the permits that we've seen permitted, some of them required, use the water withdrawal tool. They continually failed, and then even though there's, quote, a site-specific review, it doesn't actually require, like it sounds, a person going out and looking at the site. And we've seen those site reviews, and there's no explanation given. They are just then approved anyway, even after failure. And the water withdrawal tools has come under attack from a lot of different quarters now. The number one thing is that it's not looking at cumulative impacts at all. So you can keep taking water out of that same spot over and over and over again, and it's not adding anything up. So it's pretty much a nothing burger.
Both of those statements are inaccurate. We don't issue water withdrawals that have adverse impacts. And the water withdrawal assessment tool absolutely does consider the cumulative impacts on a watershed. The DEQ Water Resources Institute Resources Division monitors all of the registered withdrawals in a watershed, and they also keep the oil and gas withdrawals also within the watershed, and they compare it whenever there's any new withdrawals proposed. To me, that meets the definition of cumulative impact.
We have a question in the back here.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few weeks ago, the Oceana County Emergency Management Coordinator expressed great frustration because of the 3 accidents in that well up by Silver Lake, and his frustration because in spite of the federal regulations, the Right to Know Act, after the Bhopal tragedy in India, he still doesn't know what chemicals were released to the ground on Riley Orchards up there, and so considering all of this, my question is, why is it that we allow the Halliburton loophole to exempt the fracking industry from all accountability with the Clean Water and Clean Air Acts and the Great Lakes Compact? Thanks.
Question?
Well, we are not exempt from those rules. There are specific areas in those laws and all that address oil and gas. We are accountable to that. I'm not aware of the incident you're talking about, so it's hard for me to find.
omlive.org online.
I can speak to the exact incident that he's talking about. In Oceana County with the Riley well, the emergency manager expressed some frustration when some odor complaints started coming in from hydrogen sulfide gas. He was on site with our staff during those investigations of those complaints, and I think his frustration was he kind of didn't know that was coming and that there could be increased cooperation with your local emergency preparedness officials. What I've been working on currently, our rules for hydrogen sulfide require that that emergency manager for a sour well be notified 48 hours prior to drilling a sour well. The problem in my mind is that there might be some time distance between when that well is drilled, and again, it's been noted that when you drill a well, the drill rig comes off it, and sometime later the completion crew comes in to perform hydraulic fracturing. So in this case, there's a lag time between the time that it's drilled and the time that crew comes in. And in my mind, I'm in agreement that the important thing I think that we see is the flowback period. With the well that we've seen in Ionia and the well that we've seen in Oceana, if you're going to get hydrogen sulfide vapors, it's going to be during that flowback period. So it occurs to me that it would be a good idea to not only have coordination with your emergency manager 48 hours prior to drilling, but it would behoove companies to talk to the same environmental manager prior to flowing back that well, because that's when concerned citizens are smelling rotten eggs. They understand that hydrogen sulfide can be dangerous to their health, toxic, that those emergency managers should be aware that that flowback operation is coming back. So those are discussions that we're having right now, and it largely comes out of frustrations expressed, as the gentleman pointed out.
And for the questions, I am watching hands, so I know this gentleman's had his hand up. I'm going to go to him. Aaron, if you can take the mic there.
First of all, thank you everyone for your presentations. I'm particularly concerned with who's responsible for protecting the local citizens, particularly those who are signing these leases we learned about. It seems like no governmental body is responsible for properly informing landowners about all the risks that they're taking. Also, the potential breach of those mortgages on those homeowners. Is there anyone responsible for that? My other concern is for the workers on site. I know that most of the processes, the trucking companies, the drilling companies, the hydraulic fracturing companies, I don't know which regulatory body is responsible for making sure that they're properly protected and informed about the dangers, as you mentioned, hydrogen sulfide, the other volatile organic compounds on site. Who's responsible for that? And then as well as for the township officials, as we know, there's many township officials here who need and are asking for information. Thank you also for coming here and learning more. We're personally working with many local officials in Kent County as well. But is there any responsibility for informing them as well about all the potential negative impacts that they should be prepared for by either the state or federal or anywhere?
Let me take those 5 questions. Well, initially, I'd like to say that we have these area geologists that look out for citizen interests. Like I said, we've got them tethered with phones. Citizens can call them directly. They can call our peace line if they suspect that something is foul, they're smelling something, and we respond to those all the time. And I know our geologists spend a lot of time in people's homes going over things in greater detail, explaining risks and exposures and what's going on out there. I think we saw a great service that Curtis Talley and MSU Extension does in protecting the landowner. Frankly, the Supervisor Wells does not have a lot to do with the leasing end of things unless we're involved in the compulsory pooling process. If a company gets all their land leased up, they can pretty much come to us with a full drilling unit and proceed. So I think the service that MSU Extension is doing, getting the word out, I know they're doing a lot of these talks, get the word out about negotiating a lease, and I don't think anybody, to my knowledge, is out there doing that like they are doing.
I'd like to kind of answer a couple of the questions that you had and the other previous person as well that kind of plays into that. As far as who's responsible, one would think that the DEQ would be responsible. But in the last couple of months, last fall, we discovered that actually several tanker truck full of flowback fluid was put on northern Michigan roads, and we, Michigan Fracking that is, notified, well, I personally called the Coast Guard and the National Response Team, and then I also called the EPA. I filed a spill report, and it turns out with the EPA, well, guess who's really regulating that? The DEQ. And I said, well, the DEQ actually authorized it. Now who do I go to? And they, threw up their hands. Just a month ago in Benzie County, another incident, pretty major incident, has also happened. And some residents in Benzie County, Carla and Brian Black, Brian noticed the supposedly brine spraying. He worked in the oil fields. He knows what brine and what oil looks like. He said this stuff is really thick. It's really not brine. It's burning his nostrils. They went back and saw it. They reported it. They reported to the Benzie County Road Commission. They got test results showing BTEX levels sky high, 28 times, 1,000 times bigger than in toluene, and 28 times the recommended for benzene. And the DEQ sat on this information. I don't know, who was supposed to be tethered at that time, but there's. And then when I contacted the DEQ to find out what they're going to do about it. Again, there's no response. We keep hearing from them that they're on it, that they're regulating, that they're careful. But the thing I wanted to bring up is that the contamination record in Michigan is actually not like what they say. In 1995, the DEQ, Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division, stopped keeping a list of all the oil and contamination sites. This used to be called as the SAC list. This information comes from Dr. Christopher Grobel, who's with Grobel Environmental. I highly recommend to any township or city or county to bring Dr. Grobel to him. Unlike me, I'm free. I paid my entire way here. No one's paying me to do this. I'm a volunteer. Okay. Let me,
Keep this as brief as possible.
I will. In 2001, a study was done of 187 of the 2,842 sites, known sites of environmental contamination were due to oil and gas extraction. 25% of them contaminated drinking water, 21% took no action, only 2% were cleaned up. So that's who is responsible. Nobody.
Yay.
Yeah, I'd definitely like a rebuttal to some of that. I mean, it's too voluminous to go after, but somehow this has turned into a little bit of a personal attack. But the interesting thing that you just heard there is that everybody was called except for the DEQ on these complaints, but the DEQ is investigating that incident. And the other thing that they don't explain is that in 1983, the supervisor of wells proposed a phase out of using produced water from the oil and gas industry for brine spreading, for dust control and ice control. The county road commissions quickly formed a coalition of government and took us to task in court, and the supervisor of wells lost that. And so the road brining, the use of production fluid from road brining has stood and is allowed. If they meet certain parameters, they're allowed to put it on the road. So this is an instance where in Benzie County here recent development last week, there was material put on roads, and we're investigating whether or not that was appropriate. The Office of Oil, Gas, and Mineral approves the analytical that authorizes the wells that can be used as a source. The trucking company that either disposes of that or spreads it on the road is required to have separate vessels. So we have an ongoing investigation, and right now we're trying to determine whether or not equipment was used for dual purposes, which shouldn't be used and would be a violation of the DEQ Water Resources Division rules. There's separation of government there. That's Water Resources Division. That's not supervisor of wells. And if wells that were commingled there that shouldn't have. In other words, wouldn't have met those parameters. The SAP list, Dr. Grobel's, that gets drug out quite often. That is an old database that went down due to FoxPro. It was software problems, but certain people get a lot of mileage out of that. But interesting enough, on my very desk, I have the metadata behind that whole thing because it was also contained in our image viewer. So we have that. Despite how that was submarined and lost forever, I have it.
You posted on your website in its entirety.
Okay, I'm going to drop this one and move on to the next question. Over the last 50 years of the 12,000 wells fracked in Michigan, how many wells had safety or groundwater problems?
Yeah, right. You won't tell the truth. Zero, you'll say.
Boy, exact statistics. The oil and gas industry has their spills and releases, and they're required to report to us even de minimis spills. So we have on the order of hundreds of small-scale spills on record. The majority of those get cleaned up very quickly in 45 days. They do have more complex spills, dozens of complex spills that do impact groundwater, and those are ongoing cleanup investigations, cleanups, and it's not unlike any other industry. Underground storage tanks and other municipal accidents do happen, and we've got the staff to respond and follow through on those cleanups.
Post those on your website.
I would like to comment, though, that hydraulic fracturing, I don't believe has caused any of those. There are other issues associated with oil and gas industry, but I don't believe not one has been caused by fracking.
That's correct. The impacts are not related to hydraulic fracturing. They're related to conventional oil and gas. They're usually related to incidental surface spills. Some of them are historic. We continue to put more and more protections in place as far as like secondary containment and redundancies to ensure that we're not having those groundwater impacts, soil impacts.
I have to follow up with that because that's just another huge inaccuracy that the general public is referring to this industry as fracking, and what government, DEQ, and industry would like to keep saying, and they're saying it worldwide, is that fracking, the stuff that's going on deep in the ground, is not the cause. But actually, it's everything about the fracking industry, including the drilling, including all of it, that people in general are referring to as fracking. So there's a wonderful video, documentary film about it called Unearth the Fracking Facade, all about this very thing that you just saw happen here, where they just try to sweep that under the rug. That fracking isn't doing it, it's some other stuff, but it's the fracking.
Okay, Aaron?
Okay, guys. This panel has been wonderful. I'm part of an organization that I can't really mention because I'm a state employee. So I have 1,000 questions, for which very few will be able to be answered because I could go on and on and on. So I just have 2 simple ones. Will you be offering another presentation like this in the future? I think the audience would benefit greatly by perhaps a little bit more detail. That would be very nice. I would like to say that other DEQ presented situations, they did have the state police out in force because they were expecting protests and craziness from the public. So I think this audience would benefit again by another one, a third one. The more education, the more facts that we have, the more questions and time we have to ask is really beneficial to a deeper understanding.
Yes, I think the point is well taken. I think we learned a lot tonight about allowing 15 minutes. So I would assume our planning commissioners would like to bring in the speakers individually. And I guess what we'd like to ask you to do on the survey form that is on your chair, there's an area there for the subjects that were discussed tonight that you'd like to know more about. And I think what we will do is schedule a seminar for each one of those. Please also list your name and address on there. We'll make sure you get either an email, a letter, or some sort of notification. We'll also do what we did for this one and have media coverage and that kind of thing. But yeah, we will definitely do that, provide that opportunity.
Okay,
Yes.
One thing I forgot to mention in my presentation is we are having another public meeting at Rothbury on July 27th, and we're going to have 3 speakers. We're going to have myself, a DEQ person, and an oil and gas attorney. There's a suggested donation of $10 to cover meeting expenses, but we're going to have 3 speakers over 2 hours. So if you're interested in getting more information in depth about a lot of what was talked about tonight, that will be another opportunity for you that's not very far away.
Just two simple
July 27th, just contact our office, and my contact information should be here in the handout, the Oceana County Extension Office, and they can get you all the information about the meeting.
Can the DEQ gas guy talk about the Ionia well for a moment? I was driving on I-96 coming from Lansing on Saturday, and the hydrogen sulfide smell at that location for the hydrofrac well may or may not have been the hydrogen sulfide smell I was smelling, may or may not have been due to that particular Ionia County well. It was horrendous. And so what was happening on Saturday, last Saturday? About 11 o'clock in the morning.
I'm thinking the well is on confidential status, but it's already been spilled the beans that that well's been plugged. So I know they're wrapping up that abandonment process, and I know there's tanks there that they've got to clean. That's another discussion that we're having internally with regard to frac tanks. Things that were improved upon from the Oceana well to the Ionia well, we're going to continue to build on. In Oceana, just to give you an example, the flare was going out because of the nitrogen. And there was a 30-second delay on the autopilot. So with respect to Ionia, we went to propane-assisted flare and lower auto lights. And they added gas busters and sulfur control. But the weakest link, when you can smell sulfur dioxide in parts per billion, it's very detectable to the human nose. If you still got a weak link, you've still got the motor issue. So we're working on that and looking into that with these A1 tests and recognizing that we're in these areas, these populous areas, that even though they've got vapor recovery on all these systems, if the weakest link is like tank cleaning or oil product or something sitting in a frac tank, we might have to look at vapor recovery even on some of those frac tank vents. So very well could have been some of what you were smelling. I don't know. I know I absolutely had odor complaints during the flowback operations.
Did you get complaints about it during when people smelled it?
Yep, and our staff was out there at midnight on a Sunday.
Okay, moving on to the next question. I've got one here, we'll come back there and then there. And if you could ask one question with respect to the other people that have questions, and one question at a time, we'll come back to you if we can. One question for you, Richard. Would you be willing to list the chemicals that are used in the fracking process? This individual realizes there is a state statute that exempts you from disclosing those, and the industry from disclosing those, but is the industry willing to list all of the chemicals that are used in this process?
Well, first of all, we're not exempt from having to list those chemicals. We are required to list material safety data sheets and to provide those to the DEQ, who lists them on their website. We have to provide them to first response providers in that township or that county. We have to provide it to them, and they have to be posted at the well site on everything that we inject into the chemical. So, yeah, we're willing to list it, but we have to do it anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that needs to be cleared up as what disclosure is. There's federal trade secret that's out there for industries. So when we see frac projects and chemicals disclosed to the DEQ, whether it's a completion report or the MSDS sheets, you may get, I have to disagree with you, Rick, a little bit. The simple frac is probably 12 chemicals. I mean, I've seen lists of 30 chemicals, and I've seen, on a typical list of that, quite often you'll have about 3 chemicals that are listed, and it says proprietary and the percentage, so you're getting at the formula, is the trade secret protection that's under the federal. To get at that, states have to amend their state statutes to get at that. In DC last week, it sounds like there's a lot of movement afoot federally to work on that trade secret. In Michigan, in Canada, the major operator up north, they told their service companies if you can't disclose what it is, don't put it in there. So I think part of the environmental group's pressure on this trade secret issue has caused companies to go that way. From our standpoint, a regulatory standpoint, these three chemicals, the unknown chemicals in there, they may be benign, they might be toxics. They're going in there in a very low percentage. We're not picking them up in any kind of VOC scan. And frankly, if there's a spill or a release, we've got other protocol that we're going to take up. If there's a spill or release, we're looking for methane, ETEX, chlorides, and a trace of some undisclosed chemical is going to be to a lesser extent. I understand that's scary, but you have to keep it in context.
Thank you. Right here, and then we'll be back there.
I would like to know why the special deep injection well disposal wells are necessary if it's just household chemicals and such a low percentage. And also, is the permit ever been
One
denied?
question, sorry.
Well, a lot of the deep well disposal wells are there particularly to dispose of brine produced from oil and gas operations. The wells are also approved via the EPA and the DEQ to allow special class 1 wells are used to dispose of these fluids that come back from our hydraulic fracturing operations and from other those type of acidizing jobs. But predominantly, we have most of our disposal wells to dispose of brine fluids that we're required to by the DEQ, we're required to by the EPA to get rid of brine that we produce in our operations. The other chemicals and fluids that we have are a very, very minute portion of what's actually injected. And it's also my understanding that not only these wells are used for the oil and gas industry, but they're used for other industries too that have wastes that are different or same or probably even worse than what we put out to dispose of from many of the other industries in the state that use chemicals as well.
Thank you. In the back.
Yeah, I want to get the lawyers into this before they fall asleep over there. Other legal authorities have suggested that there's actually more that municipalities can do in the area that you're calling kind of gray areas. I'm wondering if you can be more specific about how townships, for example, can proceed in some of these gray areas. Should they go ahead and test the waters by going with ordinance amendments and that sort of thing? Or are they running some risks, and what are those risks? Can you be a little more clear on that? You seem to be saying that there are only one or two things that are possible. Others are saying there are more. And I'm wondering, where should a township actually go?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm not sure what if you're talking about what local governments can do in other states, you have to realize that that Michigan law is different and every state is different. You might read about some city local bans on fracking in Pennsylvania or New York or in Colorado. Those are not necessarily applicable in Michigan. But it's a very good question that you ask with a township or a local unit of government. What should they do? And again, that then becomes a policy issue for that local unit of government, because they have to react to their citizens' concerns about the community. And that involves the environmental aspects as well as the rights of the property owners in the area that would like to lease their property. But in terms of what should they do, should they adopt an ordinance and test it? That's a matter, again, of their policy. Local units of government have very limited coffers. And they aren't getting a lot of help from the state or tax bases in a lot of places to help up those coffers to fight fights. And they have to realize that they can adopt an ordinance, and if it is challenged, you have people who deal with oil over there who have lots of bucks. You have the DEQ over there who some people maybe sitting next to me might say, well, they're in bed with them. They get leases, they get whatever. And Anna could probably speak to that as to what the DEQ will do. I would assume two things are possible there. One, the DEQ will say nothing and will not support the local township trying to do something, because they'll say, that's your ordinance, you support, you fight it, because we follow the law in issuing our permit or in considering our permit. Unless there's a jurisdictional issue where the MDEQ and the Public Service Commission want to establish their exclusive jurisdiction, and they want to put up that fight. But I don't think you're going to get much help from the state government as a local unit of government, or from the other members of the public. Now, there may be groups around here that want to say, if you want to do this kind of an ordinance, we'll support you as the test case. And that's great, but will they put their money where their mouth is and supply the support to pay for the township's legal fees? Again, those are just issues that a township board, city commission, or village council have to consider. And when somebody from the public says, we perceive this as a problem, is there anything you can do about it, or we would like you to do this about it? You go through the normal process, considering the pros and cons, considering the potential need, whether you're doing something legal or not, or consider, is that something that we can fight the good fight over? And so the units of government need help from the state if they're going to be assured that they have some role to play in this area, because it is unsettled.
Yeah, would you like to jump in on that?
Yeah, well, I'm addressing a fellow panelist's accusation here. I didn't make this personal. There's been some personal attacks, I think, on the integrity of the DEQ, our staff. But one thing is that you're entitled to opinions, but you're not entitled to your own set of facts. And to portray it as a fact that the DEQ is in bed with the oil and gas industry is grossly inaccurate.
Sure.
There's no unholy alliance or budgetary deal that was cut that pays our salary. What was done, the legislature long ago set up a dynamic funding source where, in addition to the royalties that these companies pay, in addition to the taxes that they pay, we implemented another surveillance fee tax on oil and gas, whereby we can run our program through permit fees and make up any other additional money to run our program to oversee the oil and gas company, the industry. We receive the surveillance fee that's tacked on to natural gas liquids, natural gas, and oil. We set that fee. The legislature, through appropriation, has been supporting us. We're currently full staff. Again, I point out that we have 60 FTEs. I'm not saying 8 FTEs for the Bakken is right, but I'm telling you that we're sized right, and I'm confident that dynamic funding source would allow us, with an increased oil and gas activity, to properly ramp up our staff to keep pace with that. Now, that is not true of other programs that don't have that sort of funding source. So to suggest that we'd be better off or have more integrity if we were paid by the general fund, I think is just inaccurate, unfair.
It's not an accusation. By stating the fact that the DEQ does get money directly from the gas and oil industry through the mechanisms you just explained, and I've heard Hal Fitch explain it in much the same way once he's pressed on that issue. It's just true. It's nothing personal. You're an agency, and that's. I would like to say something about the question in the back about local ordinances, though. I know it's late. There are some other organizations to take a look at. CELDEF, Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, that's doing community rights-based ordinances. Also look at what the city of West Bloomfield has done and Cannon Township has done. Go to Flow. for Love of Water. They are another firm in Michigan that's doing a lot with local ordinances. Those are great resources.
Thank you.
We are at 9:40. Is the panel willing to go till 10? Or would you, does anybody have to get out of here?
It's getting late. It's getting late. I mean,
Could we do about 3 more questions? Okay, and we will follow up. Are you, if there is an interest by the audience in any one of you coming in and doing a presentation on your own, or maybe 2 speakers, would you guys be willing to do that in the future? To provide a more in-depth presentation, answer more questions?
You're okay.
which again, I would like to point out is a service to our local community.
Thank you. Okay, I know we have one gentleman here. We're going to go back here, and we're going to go over here.
We've heard a lot about the supervisor of wells tonight. To me, that's kind of a mystery person. I'd like to know what that person's name is, how did they get their job, and to whom is that person accountable?
Good question.
The supervisor of wells is Dan LuAnne, who's the director of the Department of Environmental Quality. The assistant supervisor of wells is Hal Fitch, who's also the state geologist. The assistant supervisor of wells obviously has a lot of the delegated authority and day-to-day running of the Office of Oil, Gas, and Minerals and the regulatory program. But ultimately, the director is the supervisor of wells.
How do you get his job, he says?
The director is appointed, the governor, I believe. Yeah. The assistant supervisor of wells, the state geologist, hired, appointed, promoted, could get fired. He's right at that level that,
No, I don't.
but in our case, he came up through the ranks. It's not a political appointment. Our current supervisor of wells has been through since 1996 now, so he's been in a couple Republican administrations and Democratic administrations.
Okay.
Just a quick question. I've heard a lot about various amounts of water used for the hydraulic fracking, and then it gets put into some kind of system for storage. Has there been any talk or trials done where you could take that existing water, filter it out somehow, and reuse it for other well drilling, so that you're not doing 5 to 30 million gallons for every well, but you're reusing some of it since it's already polluted, and you're not polluting new fresh water?
Yeah, there is technology out there that you can do that, and where that's really critical is in the state of Pennsylvania, and I know there's some companies that have been looking at doing that. It's a matter of economics, but the technology is there to do that.
Okay, I'm going to do 2 more questions. This gentleman and that gentleman had his hand up, and then we will wrap up for the evening.
Hi, I'm a resident of Ottawa County, but I have a vested interest in this whole enterprise because I also own a piece of property in upstate New York, smack dab in the middle of the Marcellus Shale. So when I went back 6 years ago to buy a piece of property, I saw these signs along the road, no fracking, and I thought I was trying to get away from using another word. I gradually got informed what it entailed, so I've been kind of keeping my eye on what's been going on. Gas shale wells, the first one was actually drilled in Fredonia, New York in 1821. This is nothing new. I've had my eye on what's been going on just to the south of New York in Pennsylvania. And not too long ago, the EPA, who I would, in my opinion, not view as a friend of fossil fuels, if we want to be honest about it, deemed that there was no linkage between hydraulic fracking and contamination of water. That's from the words of Lisa Jackson, the former EPA commissioner. Would anybody on the panel like to address that particular report and its results?
I'll go ahead. I don't want to use up all the oxygen in the room, but when we have incidents in the oil and gas industry, you can come out guns blazing. We've had some instances in Michigan that we've had to look at, and you don't come out guns blazing without the facts, getting out into a debate in the papers. You do the science and you look at it. And the EPA, unfortunately, has had some instances in Pavilion and in the Marcellus where early indications and headlines were fracking causes such and such. When you run the science, and that's where you've seen the EPA have to back down in times, and you can say it's mixing words, but is it fracking that caused it, or was it well construction? Well, we call it what it is. If it's the fracking operation and the completion, we say it's fracking and completion. If we say they had a subsurface blowout related to improper well construction, or in the case of Pennsylvania where they didn't have any the Marcellus shale explosion hit them without any well design requirements that we've had in place in Michigan since 1973, then we call it a well construction issue. Or, you know what I mean? So yeah, they've had to back down. I don't think it's this ominous conspiracy theory that they've been told to rein it in. The president's been clear that he's in favor of all the above. In the energy portfolio, it's all of them. The EPA's had to back down because they had some bad studies. And if you dig a little deeper, sure, you can go to some websites that say the EPA backed down or ate this study, but if you look it out, and I sat talking to the director of the EPA or Environment and Health last week of Colorado. She explained that they had exactly one of those situations. EPA came out blazing, the state did their study, and it's not related to hydraulic fracturing, so that's what you're seeing.
I again encourage everyone to look at that movie called Unearth the Fracking Facade that really talks about this issue. It's a very important distinction that they're making. And the EPA is backing down. Take a look at the movies Gasland and Gasland 2, especially Gasland 2, where he's revealing what's really going on with EPA. He also interviews EPA whistleblower Wes Wilson. If you can see anything by him, he's really good. The science that EPA was doing was revealing the horrors of fracking, and then there was a lid put on it. Now things are being pulled. And on camera, the people in Debbick, Pennsylvania, and Pavilion, Wyoming are being told by EPA people, your water's safe to drink, but hey, I'm off the record, totally personally, not speaking as an EPA person, I wouldn't drink it. So what exactly is going on, who knows? But it's not honest.
Right.
One more question. Do you have a question, sir?
Yes. Forgive me, say your name wrong. Ms. LuAnne, did you move closer or further away when you moved from central Michigan to northern Michigan to thousands of fracked wells?
What's your question?
Why did you move closer instead of further away to thousands of fracked wells?
It's a personal question that I don't need to answer why I moved.
Okay, I've just got two announcements.
I'm remarried, if everyone would like to know why. Okay, is that really what you need to know? Okay.
Yeah.
If you are here for education credits for MSU Master Citizen Planners, please see Aaron. I want to thank Aaron for putting together a lot of the details, and Pam for my staff. And I really want to thank the panel here tonight for staying late.
Yeah, thanks.
The overall civility of the group here. I think you did a great job.
So far. He's optimistic. Yeah.